Hello, Regis Kilbit is the name and Hearthstone is the game, and today we're going to take a look at what I consider to be the 10 worst cards in Hearthstone. Now, with almost 1,000 cards, I believe, up through the Grand Tournament, there have been some outstanding releases and quite a few below average cards, but none are quite as bad as the 10 I'm going to highlight for you today. So without further delay, let's go ahead and start with number 10 on the worst cards in Hearthstone. And number 10 is the Rogue's Cogmaster's Wrench. This 3 mana weapon only has 1 attack and 3 durability, with the effect that anytime you have a mech on the board, the weapon has +2 attack. So I want you to keep that in mind. At its very best, this weapon becomes a 3/3 for 3 mana, which is incredibly average when compared to something like a Warrior's Fiery War Axe. That's a 3/2 for 2. This is a 3/3 for 3, so you're getting 1 extra durability for 1 mana, which that's fine. But that's at its very best. It's merely okay. It's not good, it's okay. And that's conditional. You have to have a mech on the board. So that means this card's merely okay at its very best. It requires a condition that is not guaranteed at any given time. And it's only good in a very specific kind of deck, which is in a Magma Rogue, which, although that exists, there are still better options than the 3 mana Cogmaster's Wrench. So this card is not good, even at its very best. In fact, it's bad. And giving up 3 mana and a weapon slot in your deck for this card is not going to work out. There are much better alternatives both in Rogue and across all other weapon classes. The number 9 worst card in Hearthstone for me is brand new with the Grand Tournament, and it is the Argent Watchman. This is a 2 mana 2/4 with a terrible card effect. It can't attack. So unlike Ragnaros, which can't attack and is amazing because of its incredible effect, this one's effect merely makes it average. Anytime you use your hero power, the Argent Watchman can attack as normal this turn. So it costs 2 mana to make this thing even reasonably average. So essentially, you're paying the penalty of this can't attack effect to give this thing 1 extra health, because 2 mana 2/3s are everywhere. And there are lots of 2 mana 2/3s with really good effects, right? Even just average ones have incredibly good effects. So you're giving up a very positive effect for 1 health, and you're getting a very negative effect with it. Now, Ancient Watcher is the most comparable card to this. It's a 2 mana minion that can't attack, but it's a 4/5, so you can at least use its body with Taunt Givers or with Shadow Flame, and Ancient Watcher actually sees play. There's no reason ever for Argent Watchman to be played, and thus far, I don't think it has been played. It's a huge tempo sacrifice, and encourages you to use your hero power on turn 3, which is usually a terrible tempo play on turn 3 as well. So Argent Watchman is just straight up useless. At the number 8 slot is a card that used to be sort of okay, but got incredibly worse with the release of the Grand Tournament, and that is the Bay Bodyguard. This is a 5 mana 5/4 with Taunt. That's pretty vanilla when it comes to statistics and effects, but nothing too exciting, right? So why is Bay Bodyguard the 8th worst card in Hearthstone? The reason is because of a little card called Evil Heckler, brand new with the Grand Tournament. This is a 5/4 with Taunt, which sounds oddly familiar, identical to Bay Bodyguard, but it's only 4 mana. Don't forget, Bay Bodyguard is 5 mana. So you're paying 1 extra mana for nothing. So the only value this card has is to brand new players who can't afford 40 dust to craft its common quality replacement. So it might occasionally get drafted in Arena if you're desperate. It might be snuck into decks by very new players, but otherwise, this card is strictly worse in every imaginable way than its counterpart, the new card Evil Heckler. So, Bay Bodyguard, shape up, man. At least get 5 health or something. And at number 7, we're going to go back to Rogue, because unfortunately Rogue shows up a few times on this list with some of the worst cards in the entire game. And this time we're going to take a look at a minion by the name of Kidnapper. This is a 6 mana 5/3 with a combo effect that returns a minion to its owner's hand. So that can be used on opponent's minions or your own minions. Keep that in mind. But just look at the stats here. This is a 5/3 for 6 mana. Compare that to the most vanilla of cards ever, a Boulder Fist Ogre, which is a 6/7 for 6 mana. And you'll see that it's very lacking in the stats department, right? And its combo effect really isn't even that good. It's essentially a sap, the 2 mana rogue card sap, which returns a minion to an opponent's hand. So you get a sap, which is 2 mana, which means the body here is a 4 mana 5/3, which I guess is okay. It's fine. It's not that exciting. There are a lot of 4 mana 4/3s that have really powerful effects. But the effect here costs you 2 mana, and it's not even that good. Because at 6 mana, activating a combo for Rogue becomes pretty difficult. That means this is typically a very late game card with a minimally useful effect that gives you some tempo potentially, or allows you to use this as a youthful brewmaster in a sense. So you got a sap and a youthful brewmaster and a mediocre body all bundled in a one card that still hasn't found a home, is never included in any decks, and just seems relatively unplayable. To top it all off, it's an epic quality, so it costs you a ton of dust to craft it if you need it, and it's very hard to find. Thankfully, it never shows up in Arena, because it's not very good. Kidnapper, the 7th worst card in Hearthstone. Now for the number 6 slot, we're going to go back to another basic card, and that is the Dollon Mage. This is a 3 mana 1/4 with a very basic +1 spell damage buff. Now, there are lots of 3 mana 2/4s with very powerful effects. For instance, mages have Flamewaker, very good 3 mana 2/4. Warlocks, for instance, have Imp Gang Boss, a very good 3 mana 2/4 with a very powerful effect. And then you look back and you see Dollon Mage, a 3 mana 1/4. It's missing some attack and a moderate effect. So it's very hard for this to find a home. Dollon Mage gets even worse when you look at some of its 4 mana counterparts. For instance, Frigid Snowbolt, a new Grand Tournament card. That's a 2/6 for 4 with the same effect. That means you get 1 additional attack and 2 health for only a mana. That's pretty good for another common class card. It's very affordable for players, and only 1 extra mana. And then there's also Ogre Magi, another basic set card. In other words, the same set as Dollon Mage, free to all new players. That's a 4/4 for 4 mana. So you get 3 attack for 1 mana. It's incredibly better than Dollon Mage. Dollon Mage used to be better, I guess, in the old days of Hearthstone. It used to have some better stat allotments, but nowadays, let's get back to Dollon Mage. It's useless. It's bad in Arena. It never gets played and constructed. There are better alternatives for every class, even within the basic set. At 3 mana, you can't play a minion with that little of an attack and expect to do well. Dollon Mage is the 6th worst card in Hearthstone. At the number 5 slot, we have another weapon, because there are quite a few bad weapons in Hearthstone, it turns out, and that is the Warriors 3 mana King's Defender. This is a 3 mana 3/2 weapon with a battlecry effect. If you have a minion with taunt, gain 1 durability. Now you'll notice this feels pretty familiar to the warrior class, because quite possibly the best weapon in the game, Fiery War Axe, is also a 3/2, but it only costs 2 mana. So what that means is that when you compare Fiery War Axe, a 2 mana 3/2, to King's Defender, a 3 mana 3/2, the only difference is 1 mana that you're paying for this effect. But here's the thing about the effect. It's conditional. If you have a minion with taunt, gain 1 durability. That means it's not always going to happen, so you're paying a 1 mana penalty for nothing in those cases. And even when it does, you have to build a very specific deck around it. You have to have a deck with lots of taunts to ever hope this thing activates. And even then, you're still paying 1 mana for only 1 extra attack, so it's a 1 mana, 3 damage card, which isn't particularly outstanding in its own regard. So, it's overcosted. It doesn't do anything better than Fiery War Axe. It's got a conditional effect that prohibits it to anything but very specific decks, making King's Defender almost useless, and as far as I know, it has never been played seriously. I guess it's fine in Arena. There are no better options, but Warrior is such a bad Arena class anyway that I don't recommend playing it in the first place, and certainly King's Defender is not going to give you an edge against other classes. Moving on to the number 4 card, the 4th worst card in Hearthstone. This is a 3 mana neutral card. We gotta find it here. It is the Magma Ranger, often cited as one of the worst cards in Hearthstone, so I certainly don't differ there. This is a 3 mana, 5/1, which gives it possibly the most awkward and inconvenient stat alignment of any minion in the game. At only 1 health, it is killed by absolutely everything. Any class with a ping effect like druids or mages can just kill it off instantly. Any minion in the game trades into it efficiently. So you're paying 3 mana for a card that is incredibly easy to deal with for opponents. Has no effect. The 5 attack is meaningful, but you'll notice there are a lot of 3 mana cards with 4 attack that have positive effects and 3 health. So you're giving up a lot of health for basically 1 attack and no effect, making it terrible on base level. It's just bad compared to everything else. But the Grand Tournament made it even worse, and that is thanks to a card by the name of Ice Ranger, a 3 mana with no effect, with 5 attack, but it has 2 health. So in other words, you're getting 1 health absolutely for free. This card is strictly better than the Magma Ranger in every way, and it's obvious that Blizzard knew that because they called this one the Ice Ranger as sort of a joke, just to taunt all those Magma Ranger fans out there. So Magma Ranger is totally useless. If you're a new player and you can't afford to craft an Ice Ranger, I guess you could theoretically play a Magma Ranger, but there would still never, ever, 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 ever be a reason for this card to be in any deck, whether that is in Constructed or Arena. Magma Ranger is surprisingly not the worst card in Hearthstone, but it is the 4th worst card in Hearthstone. The 3rd worst card in Hearthstone, we're up to the Podium now. Getting close to the worst of the worst. Just a second. I gotta find this card. Why is it not showing up? Let me think. It's a Warlock card. It's all sets. Let me turn this off real fast. Oh, there it is. Finally found it. I thought it was 3 mana. It's only 2 mana. That card is Demon Fuse. Give a demon +3/+3, or give your opponent, or not or, give a demon +3/+3 and give your opponent a mana crystal. So this is a 3/3 buff for any demons in your deck, but it has the downside that it gives your opponent a mana crystal. Now, anyone who's ever played a ramp druid knows that giving your opponents a mana crystal is awfully bad. It allows them to play bigger things faster, makes it harder for you to keep up. It's a huge downside, right? It's basically worth 2 mana for them if you look at something like a Wild Growth. So that's a 2 mana penalty. So let's say this card has a 4 mana tempo value of some sort, right? That means you're paying 4 mana for a 3/3 buff. So that's worse than a Paladin's Blessing of Kings. It costs a slot in your deck. It gives your opponent an enormous advantage that wins Druid's games on its own. And then you have to compare it to something like a Demon Fire, which is a 2/2 buff for a demon with no downside, but it also has flexibility that it can do 2 damage to a minion, so it's a removal spell or a buff depending upon what you need. So when you compare these 2 cards side by side, Demon Fire versus Demon Fuse, you pay 1/1, or you get 1/1 in stats, you get a 1/1 buff in exchange for giving your opponent a mana crystal, but you also lose flexibility because it's not a removal spell. So it's extremely limited in what it can do. It benefits your opponent more than it benefits you, and it can only be used on demons, which means you have to play kind of a demon-focused warlock deck. So even in like handlock, it's not going to be any good. So it's specific. It helps your opponent more than it helps you. It's a bad tempo play, and it's worse than the card that sits right next to it in the collection manager. Demon Fuse is absolutely terrible in every way. It's just bad. It's going to lose you more games than it wins, whether you're playing Arena or Constructed. There is no reason to ever play Demon Fuse. But it's not the worst card in Hearthstone. There are two more that are magically, somehow, unimaginably, unbelievably worse than Demon Fuse. And the first of those is the 3-mana neutral card, brand new with the Grand Tournament. It seems like the Grand Tournament has a lot of bad cards, by the way. Coliseum Manager. This is a 2/5 for 3 mana with the effect that anytime you use your hero power, it is returned to your hand. So, the advantage of Coliseum Manager, I guess, is that it has 5 health for 3 mana. When you compare it to other 3 mana cards that are good, a lot of them are 2/4s, right? So we mentioned a few earlier in the video. So you get 1 extra health, but you pay the price of this effect, this negative effect, that anytime you use a hero power, this minion is returned to your hand. So what that means is you get a 2/5 body, but you're restricted from ever using your hero power if you want this thing to stick around on the board. So it's giving you a built-in limitation on a mediocre body that doesn't trade well on turn 3, still doesn't trade particularly well on turn 4, and doesn't do anything beneficial for you. It is just a vanilla 2/5 body. It doesn't have a powerful effect like so many other 3-mana cards. So the downside is technically within your control, but it still reduces flexibility and decision options for you. So it basically sticks you on a path. You cannot use your hero power if you want to take advantage of Coliseum Manager. So there's just nothing about this card that is useful or beneficial or makes it stand out. It's just bad. It was immediately laughed upon its reveal as one of the worst cards in the set, and people were considering TGT doomed in the first place because cards like Coliseum Manager are in the set. It's a rare quality, so thankfully it won't penalize your arena runs all that often. But there's absolutely no reason to craft it. If you waste it in a card pack, I'm so sorry that you drawed Coliseum Manager instead of something useful in that rare quality. It's just not a good card. It doesn't do anything, and it hurts you in a variety of ways. It's one of the weakest 3-mana cards in the entire set, and I hope you never ever have to play with Coliseum Manager. But it's still not the worst card in Hearthstone. There's one more that in my mind is indisputably the worst card in the game. So of all the basic cards, of all the old cards, of all the cards that have never ever been played, this is a brand new one from the Grand Tournament, and like so many other Grand Tournament cards on this list, it is absolutely unplayable. It's actually going to hurt you if you play this card. It's so bad. And there are 1,000 alternatives which are better. And the worst card on Hearthstone in my mind is Poisoned Blade. This is the 4-mana rogue weapon. It is a 4-mana 1/3. 1 attack and 3 durability. Now we've seen a few weapons on this list with bad stat alignments, but this is by far the worst. 3 durability for 4 mana is nothing particularly special, and 1 attack for 4 mana is abysmal. Compare this, for instance, to a Paladin's Light's Justice, which is a 1 mana card that is 1/4. Okay? It's a 1 mana 1/4. So you're paying 3 extra mana to get 1 less durability. So that's the first comparison, right? It's bad. Compare it to something like a Rogue's Assassin's Blade, which is a 5 mana card, so 1 extra mana, 4 in extra durability, and 2 extra attack. So you're getting a 2/1 for 1 extra mana. which is huge, right? You're basically getting 8 extra attack out of an Assassin's Blade for 1 extra mana when comparing it to a poison blade. But here's the thing: poison blade does have an effect, right? So to be fair, let's read the effect. Your hero power gives this weapon +1 attack instead of replacing it. So anytime you cast your hero power while this is equipped, right, it suddenly becomes a 2/3, and then a 3/3, and then a 4/3, and then a 5/3. Okay? So let's just say we use our hero power twice, and it becomes a 3/3. That means we paid 4 mana for the card, 2 mana for the first hero power, another 2 mana for the second hero power. That means we have an 8 mana cost built into a 3/3 weapon. 8 mana for a 3/3. Now let's take a look at Assassin's Blade. It's a 5 mana 3/4. 8 mana for a 3/3 or 5 mana for a 3/4. I think it becomes obvious pretty quickly how bad Poison Blade is. I absolutely cannot think of a reason for this card to exist. I don't see anything in combo potentials. I don't see anything significant about the difference between 4 mana and 5 mana. It's worse than your hero power. It actually makes your hero power worse because you only get 1 attack instead of 1 attack and 2 durability. It's bad compared to a 1 mana paladin card. Like, it's strictly worse than a 1 mana paladin card. I just don't know why this weapon exists. Other than making Blingtron 3000 worse, there's just no reason for this card to ever be thought of or created. And the worst of all is that it's an epic quality, which means it costs 400 mana to craft. And here's the secret: I didn't have this card at the beginning of this video. I didn't have this card before I made this video, which means I crafted a Poison Blade just for this video. So basically anyone who watches this video owes me 400 dust, because I crafted this thing just to show it in the video. And I'm still reeling from that. I had over 8,000 dust, and instead I have a Poison Blade. 400 dust for this absolute monstrosity, unbelievably terrible card. If you waste an epic card draw in a pack on a Poison Blade, man, you have every reason to be upset. That is some luck that was wasted. I hope that when you open packs, you never ever see this thing staring in your face, because it's just going to give you 100 dust. There's no reason to ever consider playing it, whether you're in Arena, Constructed, any other game, whether you need a weapon in real life. Don't even worry. Poison Blade, without consideration, without a doubt, bar none, the absolute worst card in Hearthstone.